is Jeffrey Epstein waited in a New York jail or New York prison system for underage sex trafficking charges. He was in his cell. He was in suicide watch. Cameras in the facilities were basically busted and broken. And in one case, when Epstein was in a cell with another inmate, Epstein, that morning, he's unconscious. The other inmate is laid there like, I have no idea what happened. I have no idea what happened. So Epstein is put on suicide watch. Epstein was supposed to be watched for basically every 30 minutes. There was supposed to be a check-in on Epstein. And yet, there was not. Not just not a check-in, there were stretches where they were going apparently for like 8 hours without any kind of check. By the same token, when you look at the logs, it would have that all of the checks were being completed. Problem. What happens when the person who's in the prison cell that you're supposed to be guarding, that you're supposed to be making sure is safe so that person can be prosecuted? I mean, after all, he's in the ward of the state at that point. And regardless of what his crimes and everything else was, that's secondary to the fact he was a ward of the state. And his job, your job, the state's job at that point, would have been to prosecute Epstein and to figure out who was connected to Epstein. Epstein had friends all across the political and media spectrum. And when you find out that this guy is an apex pedophile, well, you start having questions about some of the people that he was affiliated with and some of the people who were hanging out with him, especially people that were hanging out around his island. Nobody, majority of the public, didn't believe that Epstein was ever going to see the light of day in court. Not because he was going to off himself, but because they thought he was going to be offed, even if it came up that he offed himself despite that he was offed. I have no idea what happened to Epstein. I know they keep saying it's a suicide. Maybe, maybe not, considering the busted cameras and the lack of oversight at the prison. That said, on the overt level, it's a suicide. And on the overt level, there's going to be people held responsible because how did he suicide himself if indeed you were watching him for every 30 minutes? Apparently they weren't. So this is Tova, Noel, and Michael Thomas. These are the two guards that were responsible for ensuring that Epstein was alive and kicking in order to serve trial. These are the two that were surfing the web, that were asleep, as opposed to doing their duty, watching to ensure that the pedophile stayed alive so the pedophile can get tried. They failed in their task miserably. And as such, they are barely escaping jail. So they've decided to cooperate with prosecutors to give 100 hours of community service and apparently to give a review of what occurred that night. I mean, they've admitted that they made false statements in the logs and false statements in regards to the monitoring and everything else. But, you know, they are basically, right here, this is Justice Department review of the ordeal that they will complete 100 hours of community service. The judge at one point said that place was incompetent or run by people who were basically incompetent at jail. I mean, one of the most high-profile prisoners in the prison system, maybe over the course of 25 years. And you allow the guy to off himself. And look, the responsibility of this is in New York State, yes. By the same token, there were people involved in that process. Epstein, his ass, was supposed to be in court. His ass was supposed to have pressure applied to him so he could talk and out the other pedophiles that was nearby and he was working with. He is not going to get that opportunity. The other woman is there. I can't think of her name. It'll come to me. She is still in prison. And, of course, they're giving her due diligence because of Epstein offing himself. But they're escaping jail time. I'm not a big fan of putting people in prison like talking about. And so I'm not entirely bothered that they're escaping jail time. I am bothered that they let Epstein either off himself or somebody off him. And I know there are a lot of people who would say, no, these guys are in on it. They're taking a plea. I have no idea. And maybe that's the worst aspect of all of this. People would say, oh, it's a suicide. And they would just own up to that. And other people would say, well, no, they had all of those busted cameras. You had people who just so happened both taking a nap at the time when he was supposed to be watched. I have no idea what happened. No idea. Did he off himself, or did somebody help him off himself? I am not of mind to disregard the latter of that. Like, share, and subscribe.